It's good we start with Surah Al-Fatiha. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Ar-Rahmanir Rahim. Maliki Yawmiddin. Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in. Ihdina as-sirata al-mustaqim. Sirata alladhina an'amta 'alayhim ghayril maghdubi 'alayhim waladdallin. Sadaqallahu al-'aliyyul 'azim. أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين ولعن الله ولا أعدائهم أجمعين من الأولين والآخرين آمين يا رب العالمين. أما بعد. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. So in our previous session, we ascended the mountain of the theology of Mahdawiyyah to gaze upon the summit of identity. We established that the Mahdi is not a mythical hope or a future hypothesis, but a present living reality, Muhammad ibn Hassan al-Askari, the witness of our deeds and the heir of the prophets. Tonight, we descend from the mountain of identity into the valley of duty. It is not enough to know who he is. The terrifying and transformative question is, who are we in relation to him? If our previous session was about the commander, this session is about the soldier. If our previous session established the promise, this session establishes the preparation. We are pivoting from theology to sociology, from what we believe to how we live. Now, this transition is critical because history is littered with communities who recognize their prophet or their leader, but they fail to serve him. The Israelites, for example, recognized Prophet Moses, yet they refused to enter the Holy Land. The people of Kufa recognized Imam Hussein, yet they ended up abandoning him in Karbala. Recognition alone does not guarantee salvation. It is Intidhaar, or awaiting, that bridges the gap between belief and loyalty. Tonight, we dissect the most misunderstood concept in the whole doctrine of Mahdawiyyah. We aim to rescue the concept of waiting from the paralysis of apathy and restore it to its true meaning, a dynamic revolutionary state of readiness. Before we continue, a word on preparation. As is the case with all of our sessions, be they from the Art of Supplication series, the Lantern of the Past series, the Patience, Tabeen, or Wilaya in the Home series, there is a requirement for everyone to engage not just with this session, but with the previous ones in each series, ideally in order and in full, to get the most from what we cover. Now, we appreciate this can seem a daunting task, but honestly, its importance cannot be overstated. We will, as we generally do, provide a recap of the previous session. However, this is always summarized and lacks the nuance and detail of the full treatment. So while there is a recap, this does not replace studying and, more importantly, reflecting on the previous sessions. So without further ado, let's implore him to grant us wisdom and tawfiq, ability and success in understanding this important and indeed life-changing subject. And not just understanding, but in truly becoming resolute and devout soldiers of Imam al-Mahdi, may our souls be his ransom, that we may be from those who help the sun rise in the west, and that we become from those whom he accepts among the successful. In his most beautiful name we proceed. Please give me a salawat. We move to the recap, which is titled The Living Promise Between Prophecy and Presence.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
Before we define our duty, we must stand firmly on the three pillars of truth we erected in our previous session. For the benefit of those joining us now and to refresh the spirits of those who were present, let us recall the reality of the one that we await. Firstly, the specificity of the Savior. We moved beyond the abstract universal hope held by other faiths. While the world waits for the concept of salvation, we established that the Shia await a specific man. We identified him not as a future possibility, but as a historical certainty. Muhammad ibn al-Hassan al-Askari, may our souls be his ransom. Born in the garrison city of Samarra in 255 years after Hijrah, approximately 1,200 years ago. The fulfillment of the prophecies given to Adam. We established that the earth is never, not for the blink of an eye, void of a divine proof, a hujjah. And just as the Quran is the silent book, he is the speaking book. Without him, the connection between the heaven and the earth would be severed, and the earth would swallow its inhabitants. We then looked at the revolution of vocabulary, anonymity, not absence. Crucially, we corrected our understanding of ghaiba or occultation. We argued that ghaiba does not mean absence or invisibility, rather it means anonymity. Using the Quranic paradigm of Prophet Joseph or Yusuf, we understood that the Imam is present amongst us. In the same way as Prophet Joseph, Yusuf, walked in the markets of Egypt and dealt with his brothers who did not recognize him, the Imam Mahdi walks in our markets, steps on our carpets, and attends our Hajj. He is not a ghost living in a cave. He is a citizen of this earth living incognito, the witness or ash-Shahid, who observes our deeds, our public bravery, our private sins, with a heart that grieves for our failures and rejoices in our victories. Now we look at the heir of the prophets and the resurrector. Finally, we defined his mission, not merely as reform, but as resurrection, or what we call ba'ath. We established that he is the heir who carries the physical artifacts of the prophets. He has the staff of Moses to shatter illusions. He has the ring of Solomon to command governance. He has the shirt of Joseph to restore sight. And he has the sword or al-Faqih of Prophet Muhammad and Imam Ali in order to separate truth from falsehood. He comes to complete the unfinished symphonies of past prophets, to remove the monkeys from the pulpit, those who have hijacked the mission of Islam, and to revive the earth with justice after it has died through oppression. And now a quick conclusion of the recap. This theological reality that the Imam is alive, present and witnessing demands a logical reaction. If we were waiting for a leader to be born in the distant future, perhaps we could afford to sleep. One does not prepare an army for a commander who does not yet exist. But because he is here, because he is waiting for us, our passivity becomes inexcusable and unforgivable. The relationship between the Imam and the Ummah is reciprocal. He awaits our maturity, we await his return, his appearance. But there is a profound difference in the quality of this waiting. He's waiting with the patience of a father watching a child learn to walk. He is ready, but the child is stumbling and falling over. Our waiting too often has been the waiting of a spectator, sitting around expecting some sort of show to begin. Tonight we shatter the idol of passive waiting. We assert the thesis that Intidhaar is not a noun, but that it is a verb. It is not a state of rest. It is an act of war against the status quo. It is, as we shall discover, an act of worship, an act of resistance, and an act of construction. In his most profound name and with full reliance on his support, let us proceed to the main part of tonight's session. Please give me a salawat. We move on to the main session, which is Introduction to Mahdawiyyah Part 2, The Philosophy of Intidhaar, Action Not Apathy, and we start with The Great Fallacy, Dismantling Passive Waiting. Please give me a loud salawat. So we must begin by dismantling the most dangerous weapon Satan has deployed against the believing community, the weapon of distorted Intidhaar. For centuries, a toxic interpretation has poisoned the minds of certain believers. They latched on to the famous mutawatir, which means widely transmitted narration, found in the books of all of the schools of Islam regarding the mission of the Mahdi. Hadith is very famous. The references in the write-up, it reads, "He will fill the earth with equity and justice as it was filled with oppression and tyranny." From this sacred promise, these people drew a catastrophic conclusion. thinking, if his coming depends on the world being full of oppression, then we should simply let oppression spread. Reform delays his arrival. Corruption hastens it. This logic turns the believer into an accomplice of satanic forces. It suggests that to welcome the ultimate reformer, we must destroy reform. It suggests that to welcome the holy physician, we must poison the patient. This is not the waiting of the righteous, it is the waiting of the nihilist. The great philosopher and martyr Ayatollah Murtada Mutahhari rigorously dismantled this fallacy in his seminal work on the Mahdi. He argued that this type of destructive intidhar negates the Quranic obligation of enjoining the good, amr bil ma'ruf, transforming Islam into a tool for preserving corruption. He said, this type of awaiting is destructive awaiting. This kind of understanding regarding the awaiting of relief and the uprising of the promised Mahdi leads to the suspension of Islamic limits and laws, and ultimately results in sheer permissiveness. The reference is in the write-up. We must therefore correct our lens. The Mahdi does not arrive from a distance to a world that has totally abandoned God. He reveals himself to a world where a core group of believers has reached the peak of readiness to support him against that abandonment. He is not waiting for the world to be dark enough to enter. He is waiting for the torchbearers to be bright enough to signal his emergence. Let's now look at the grammar of expectation, reclaiming Intidhaar. We must reclaim the vocabulary of our faith from the grip of passivity. To understand our duty, we must look at the grammatical root of the Imam's title. In the Arabic language, a simple shift of vowel changes the entire meaning and theology of a word and therefore of the end times. We know him as al-Muntadhir, with a fatha on the Muntadhir. This is the passive participle, meaning the awaited one, the one whom the world is waiting for. But we often forget that he is also al-Muntadhir, which has a kasra on the al-Muntadhir. This is the active participle, meaning the awaiting one. So what is he awaiting? He is awaiting the divine command. He is awaiting the completion of the 303 commanders. We will discuss this important point in a future session, God willing. He is awaiting the maturity of the masses. This creates a reciprocal relationship. It is not a one-way street where we sit and wait for him to arrive. He is standing and waiting for us to rise. His waiting is far more painful than ours, for he witnesses the oppression that we might only hear about. As Imam Jawad, peace and blessings be upon him, explains regarding his title, Imam Jawad teaches us, because he has an occultation whose days will be many, the sincere ones will await, yantadhiru, his emergence. The reference is in the write-up. The implication of this is terrifying. If he is al-Muntadhir, the one who is waiting, and we are the object of his wait, then our lack of readiness is the very cause of his delay. Let's now look at the deed, not the feeling. With this reciprocity established, we understand why the Holy Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him and his family, did not describe Intidhaar as a state of heart or a feeling of hope. He described it with the word amal, or deed, or action. If waiting were merely sitting in a mosque crying for his appearance, then the Prophet would have called it the best of states, afdalul ahwal, the best of state. Instead, he called it the best of action. Prophet Muhammad has said, and the references in the write-up, the best of actions, afdalul a'mal, of my community, of my ummah, is awaiting the relief. This single word, a'mal, shatters the idol of laziness. It categorizes intidhar alongside prayer, salat or namaz, and alongside striving or jihad. It is something you do, not something you feel. Let's now look at movement, not stagnation. The leader of the Islamic Revolution, Imam Khamenei, may God protect him, expands on this concept, redefining intidhar not as a pause in history, but rather as the engine of history. He explains that true waiting creates vitality, nishat, and movement, whereas false waiting creates lethargy. Imam Khamenei says, the meaning of intidhar is that a human being does not surrender to the existing status quo. Intidhar is movement. Intidhar is not stagnation. And the reference is in the write-up. Now let's look at two interesting analogies, the student and the soldier. This will help us to visualize this notion. So think about it this way. Is a student awaiting their final exam if they spend their entire semester asleep? No, they are neglectful. The student who is truly awaiting the exam is the one who is studying late into the night. Another one is a soldier who is awaiting the general's inspection. If the soldier is sitting in the dirt with an unpolished rifle, his clothes disheveled, not really paying much attention to his surroundings. Of course he's not, no. The soldier who is awaiting is standing at attention. His uniform is pressed. His weapon is cleaned. His eyes are forward. He's at attention. This is the reality of intidhar. We are the soldiers in the barracks. The general is present, observing our readiness. To be asleep when the command is given is not patience. It is treason. Let's now look at our Quranic anchor, the command to station. To understand the divine mandate for the Akhir Zaman, for the end times, we turn to the final verse of Surah Al-Imran, the third chapter of the Quran, the chapter of the family of Imran, verse number 200. This verse is the strategic manual for the community of the Mahdi. God commands the believers. He says, O you who have believed, be patient and excel in patience and remain stationed and fear God that you may succeed. Let's now look at the tafsir or exegesis of this verse by Ahlulbayt. So while the obvious or apparent meaning refers to the guarding of the military borders, the Ahlulbayt provide a much deeper interpretation that connects this duty specifically to the Imam of the age. There are three words used in this verse: Isbiru, Sabiru, and Rabitu. Imam Baqir decodes these three stages of command as follows. He says, Isbiru means be patient in performing your obligations. Sabiru, excel in patience against your enemies. And Rabitu, station yourselves in readiness for your awaited Imam. And the reference is in the write-up. So let's look at the binding contract of readiness. Among the leading exegetes of our time, Ayatollah Jawadi Amali, may God protect him, in his monumental Tafsir at-Tasneem, expands on the concept of murabata, or stationing. He explains that ribat, the word ribat, literally means tying, like tying a horse at the frontier. Therefore, murabata with the Imam means tying one's existence to his mission. It is not a casual relationship. It is a binding contract of readiness. He clarifies that this stationing requires both external military readiness and internal spiritual intellectual vigilance. Ayatollah Jawadi says, Murabata means closing or guarding the borders. But Murabata in the culture of Intidhar is not merely geographical border guarding. Murabata means that the awaiting human being ties his soul and intellect to the wilayah and is always armed and awake in the trench of defending the sanctuary of religion and the Imam of the time. One who is asleep cannot be a murabit or a stationed guard. And the reference is in the writer. The implication over here is clear. True intidhar is to live life in the trenches, intellectually and spiritually, never leaving one's post, awaiting the commander's inspection of the lines. Let's now look at redefining power from relief to strength. So if intidhar is a deed and a stationing, then naturally it manifests as motion. Passive waiting relies on the idea that we are weak and he will save us. Active waiting relies on the idea that we must become strong in order to serve him. The founder of the Islamic Republic and the late leader of the Islamic Revolution, Imam Khomeini, may God rest his pure soul, shattered the invalid, corrupt narrative that Shia Islam is a religion of passive suffering. He redefined intidhar not as hoping for relief from pain, but as preparing the instruments of power. Imam Khomeini said, awaiting the relief is awaiting power. Preparation is essential. We want to bring humanity out of this constriction of injustice, and this requires power. We must not sit and wait for the Imam to come and solve our problems while we do nothing. We must prepare the ground. And the reference, of course, is in the write-up. Let's now look at the resistance as living intidhar. This theology of power finds its sharpest expression in the axis of resistance. The leaders of the resistance did not fight because they calculated they had more weapons than the enemy. They fought because resistance is the practical definition of intidhar. The martyr and thinker Sayyid Abbas al-Musawi, may God rest his pure soul, the former Secretary General of the Party of God, articulated this precise connection between the rifle and the prayer mat. He said, "We do not wait the Mahdi with slogans. We await him with rifles and blood. Indeed, the resistance is the practical paving of the way, what we call Tamheed, which we'll come to shortly, for his appearance." The reference is in the write-up. Similarly, the master of the martyrs of the Islamic resistance, Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah, may God rest his pure soul, consistently framed the victories of the resistance not as ends in themselves, but as steps on the staircase towards the great victory. He taught that building a strong society is the invitation for the Imam. He said, "We do not fight merely to liberate land. We fight to prepare a nation that is worthy of the Imam of the time." And of course, the references are on the write-up. Let's now have a look at our first lesson for the evening. Lessons for the present, the antidote to despair. The world today is designed to crush your hopes. The images from Palestine, the corruption of the global system, the brazen power of arrogance. All of this is engineered to make the believer say, there's no point. Evil is far too strong. Passive intidhar leads to spiritual depression because it relies on an external savior to fix a world you feel helpless to change. It renders you a victim of history. Active intidhar destroys depression because it gives you a mission. When you understand that your small action, whether it's boycotting an oppressor, teaching a child truth, or building a community institution or anything else, is a direct contribution to the Imam's infrastructure of return, your life gains a cosmic purpose. The lesson for the present is to shift our internal narrative. We are not victims waiting to be rescued. We are engineers preparing the landing strip. Every act of resistance against despair, regardless of how insignificant it might appear to ourselves, is a brick in the structure of his government. And now for our first call to clarify against the theology of neutrality. We must be courageous in clarifying a difficult truth within our communities. There exists a school of thought, a mindset, sometimes termed the Hujjatiyyah, that separates religion from politics, claiming we must strictly pray and mourn until the Imam arrives, and that intervening in politics is raising a banner before the Mahdi does. We must clarify. To separate Islam from justice is to separate Islam from the Mahdi. Anyone who tells you, do not speak about politics, just wait for the Imam, such a person is asking you to disobey the very Imam that you are waiting for and that is waiting for you. The Imam is the Chief of Justice. How can his followers be neutral in the face of injustice? Our loyalty is defined by Ziyarat Ashura, where we say, I am at peace with those that are at peace with you. I am at peace with those who are at peace with you. And I am at war with those who are at war with you. This is a declaration of political and social alignment. You cannot be at war with the enemies of the Imam while sitting comfortably with the oppressors of your time. We must teach our youth. You cannot be a soldier of the Mahdi while being a pacifist in the face of the Yazids of this age. Please give me a salawat and we move to the next point, which is the architecture of delay, why we are the barrier. So having established that we must act, the immediate question arises, how do we act? Before we discuss political organization or social resistance, we must address the primary battlefield, which is the human soul. There is a comfortable lie we often tell ourselves. We are ready, but the Imam is delayed. The brutal truth, taught by our mystics and jurists, is the opposite. The Imam is entirely ready. We are the ones who are delayed. The occultation is not caused by God's reluctance to send guidance. It is caused by the community's incapacity and refusal to receive it. You cannot pour the ocean into a cup, the cup will shatter. You cannot host a leader in a ruin. The ruin must be rebuilt into a palace. The Imam does not need more soldiers. The census of believers is in the millions. What he needs is better soldiers. He requires souls that have mastered themselves so they can master the world. Let's have a look at the Quranic law. Change begins within. This principle is not just poetic. It is Quranic law. God has bound the fate of people to the state of their souls. He declares in the Quran. In Quran, Surah Al-Ra'd, the chapter of the thunder, 13th chapter of the Quran, verse number 11. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, indeed, God will not change the condition of a people until they change themselves or what is in themselves. Allama Tabatabai, in his monumental exegesis, Tafsir al-Mizan, explains that this verse establishes a rigorous causal link. It is not a suggestion. It is a divine formula. The external reality of a divinely guided government cannot manifest until the internal reality of souls has transformed. Allama says, it is a decisive decree. There is a correlation between them. Whenever the psychological state changes such that they turn away from what they were upon, God changes the blessings or conditions that they possess. Let's have a look at the Imam's diagnosis. The Imam himself confirmed this diagnosis in his famous letter or tawqi' to Shaykh al-Mufid. He explicitly stated that the barrier to his appearance is not the strength of the enemy, but the spiritual inconsistency of those professing to be his followers. He says, if our Shia or our followers, may God grant them success in his obedience, were united in their hearts regarding the fulfillment of the covenant upon them, the blessing of meeting us would not have been delayed. And the reference is in the write-up. Let us pause on this for a moment. The Imam does not blame the enemy. He does not blame the governments of oppression. He points the finger at us, at the disunity of our hearts, at our failure to fulfill the covenant. This is the real reason for his delay. This is not a letter of comfort. It is a letter of accountability. Let's now look at the insights of the Gnostics, of the Urafa. The great mystic of our time, Ayatollah Bahjat, may God rest his pure soul, pierced through the excuses of the community. When students would ask him, what must we do to see the Imam? He would turn the question back onto their own spiritual state. He taught that the Imam is not looking for a physical meeting. He is looking for spiritual affinity. Ayatollah Bahjat said, we must fix ourselves so that the Master appears. If we are good, he himself will come. He came to the tent of the old woman. We mentioned this in the first session, because she had purified herself. We do not need to look for him. We need to become the kind of people he looks for. And the reference is in the write-up. Let us pause on this image for a moment. If you recall from the previous session, the old woman in her tent, she did not travel to find the Imam. She did not possess wealth or status or learning. She possessed purity. So the Imam came to her and helped her. This is the secret the mystics guard. Proximity to the Imam is not geographical. Rather, it is spiritual. And this mystical truth has political consequences. Let's have a look at from self to society, the political necessity. A soldier who has not conquered his own ego, his nafs, is a liability on the battlefield. A gun in the hand of an unpurified man is a danger to his own army. This is why Imam Khomeini, prior to leading the revolution against the American-imposed Shah, led a revolution against the self. Imam Khomeini said, the whole world is the presence of God. He who has not refined his own self cannot refine others. He who is imprisoned by his own desires cannot liberate humanity. And the reference is in the write-up. You see how the mystic and the revolutionary arrive at the same destination by slightly different roads. Ayatollah Bahjat spoke of the old woman's tent. Imam Khomeini speaks of the battlefield. But the principle is identical. Purification precedes proximity. Let's now have a look at the vessel and the light. The teacher of divine sciences, Ayatollah Hassanzadeh Amali, brings this to a cosmic level. He speaks of the human heart as a vessel, what we call wi'ah. The knowledge and authority of the Mahdi are heavy. They require a container that is robust and pure. If the vessel is cracked by sin, it cannot hold the water of life. He reminds us that the primary work of the awaiting believer is emptying, what we call takhliyah, so that the adornment of the Imam's presence can occur. Ayatollah Hassanzadeh says, the soul must prepare for divine knowledge, which is a guest from the celestial realms. As long as the house is not emptied of strangers, the owner of the house will not take up residence in it. The reference is in the write-up. Let's now have a look at the uniform of the soldier, wara' and piety. If we are soldiers in a barracks, what is our uniform? It is not a particular style of clothing. The uniform of the Mahdi's army is a specific spiritual quality. Imam al-Sadiq did not leave this to our imagination. In a foundational text regarding the ghaiba, the occultation, he sets the entrance criteria for this army. He does not ask for physical strength or wealth or influence. He asks for wara, scrupulousness. Imam Sadiq says, whoever wishes to be among the companions of the Qa'im should wait, meaning they should cultivate intidhaar and should act with wara, scrupulous piety and good morals while he or she is waiting. And the reference is in the write-up. So now we look at the discipline of the doubtful. And over here we must distinguish between taqwa and wara. Many people haven't even heard this term wara. Taqwa is generally understood as doing that which is obligatory, wajib, and avoiding that which is haram or forbidden. Wara is a much higher fortification. Think of it like this. It is to stop not just at the red light of the forbidden, but to stop at the amber light of the doubtful, what we call shubuhat. It is the extreme sensitivity of the soul to anything that might darken it. Imam Khomeini, in his ethical masterpiece, the 40 Hadith, defines wara as the crucial stage after repentance or tawbah, without which the spiritual journey is impossible. It is the refusal to graze one's sheep near the precipice of sin. Imam Khomeini writes, indeed, wara is the abandoning of doubtful matters out of fear of falling into prohibitions, and it is the criterion for human perfection. The reference is in the write-up. Let's now look at the jurisprudence of trust. This high-level piety transforms how a believer interacts with society. It's not just about prayer beads. It's about financial and social integrity. The supreme authority, juristic authority, Ayatollah Sistani, may God protect him, in his guidance to the believers, emphasizes that true waiting for the Imam is proven through sidq, truthfulness, and amana, trustworthiness. He reminds us that the Imam does not need devotees who cheat in business or lie in politics. Said Sistani says, it is upon the believers to adorn themselves with truthfulness in speech and the fulfillment of trusts. For indeed, this brings joy to their guardians, which is, of course, the Ahlulbayt, and especially Imam al-Hujjah. May our souls be his ransom. Let's now look at the barrier between us and him. So a question might have come to everyone's mind. Why is wara the specific condition for the Mahdi? Because the Mahdi is pure light, and connection with him requires affinity. A soul darkened by carelessness cannot tune into his frequency. Ayatollah Bahjat taught that the only barrier between us and the Imam is our own lack of wara. He viewed every sin as a slap in the face of the Imam. Ayatollah Bahjat, may God rest his pure soul, said, should we not reflect on what we have done that has caused this occultation between us and His Holiness? Committing sins, not considering God as the observer, and not seeing the Imam of the time as present. These are the things that distance us from him. The reference is in the write-up. Let's now look at the necessity of precaution. If sin is the barrier, then precaution is the guard who keeps us from approaching the barrier in the first place. The teacher of the jurists, Ayatollah al-Uzma Khoi, may God rest his pure soul, established the methodology of ihtiyat, or precaution, in jurisprudence. While legally one might find a loophole, the spirit of wara demands precaution in matters of the rights of others, what we call haqqun nas, and the rights of God. For the soldier of the Mahdi, the question, is it technically halal, is the wrong question. The question rather should be and is Is this worthy of the Imam's eyes? Now, this reframing transforms every decision, from business dealings to casual speech, to how we spend our private hours. All of them are converted and changed into a test of loyalty. We are training ourselves now in the small decisions, in the amber light moments, for the day when the command comes without explanation and obedience must be immediate. This is precisely what our teacher, Ayatollah Sheikh Mohsen Araki, may God protect him, means when he defined al-Intidhaar itself as a form of spiritual conditioning, saying, Intidhaar is the conditioning of the soul for absolute obedience to the wali. And the reference is in the right hand. Let's now look at the divine commandment of strength. Now, while wara purifies the vessel, it does not fill the arsenal. The Imam is the avenger, al-Muntaqim. He is the destroyer of the structures of shirk or polytheism. And there are many, many types of polytheism. We'll discuss that, inshallah, in one of our other sessions. This mission requires strength and power. God does not suggest that we become strong. He commands it with an imperative verb that echoes through the corridors of time. He speaks to the believers in the age of occultation in the same way he spoke to the people of Badr. He says in Quran, Surah Al-Anfal, the chapter of the spoils of war, 8th chapter of the Quran, verse number 60. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, and prepare against them whatever you are able of power and of steeds of war, by which you may terrify the enemy of God and your enemy. Let's now look at the tafsir of unlimited potential. So the word used in this verse is وَأَعِدُّوا لَهُمْ مَا اسْتَطَعْتُم مِّن قُوَّةٍ. The word is quwwah. What is quwwah? What is power? Is it merely swords and arrows? Allama Tabatabai in Tafsir al-Mizan shatters the notion of antiquated warfare. He explains that the indefinite form of the word quwwah implies the means of power evolve with time. The command is therefore open-ended. Whatever technology, whatever science, whatever strategy is required to deter the enemy of that specific age is a religious obligation. Allama writes in Al-Mizan, the command to prepare for terrifying them encompasses everything upon which the name of power applies, in terms of numbers and equipment, whether that is the known weaponry of the past or other things through which strength is perfected. The reference is in the write-up. Let's have a look now at deterrence, not terror. We must be hyper-vigilant in clarifying the Quranic terminology to prevent its weaponization against us. When the Quran says to terrify, turhibuna, the enemy, it does not mean terrorism or irhab, in the modern sense of killing innocents or spreading chaos. Rather, it means deterrence. It means possessing such strength, dignity, and capability that the enemy is too afraid to attack you. It is the difference between a criminal who stabs people in the street, who is a terrorist, and a strong guard whose mere presence prevents the crime, which is a deterrent. The resistance movements do not target civilians. They defend civilians. They do not spread chaos. They create order in the face of occupation. This distinction is not Semitic. It is the difference between the path of the prophets and the path of Pharaoh. Let's now have a look at the jurisprudence of defense. The master of the jurists, Ayatollah al-Khoi, may God rest his pure soul, establishes that defense of the existential core of Islam, what we call Baydat al-Islam, meaning the core existence of the faith, is a logical and legal absolute. If the enemy possesses capabilities that the believers lack, the believers are in a state of sin until they bridge that gap. Preparation is not recommended or mustahab. It is entirely obligatory, wajib. Al-Khoi says, the obligation of defending the Muslims in the sanctuary of Islam is among the most important of religious obligations. And the reference is in the write-up. So let's now have a look at the intellectual arsenal. Ayatollah Jawadi Amali adds a crucial dimension. Physical power without intellectual power is blind. In the age of AI and media warfare, quwwa includes academic excellence. A believer who fails in school, who lacks professional expertise, who is ignorant of modern politics, is a weak link in the Mahdi's defense line. Ayatollah Jawadi says, the power of knowledge is the foundation. Ignorance is weakness, and the strong believer is better and more beloved to God than the weak believer. Let's now have a look at the school of the vanguard. This theology was not just left in books. It was forged in fire by the commanders who paved the way. Let us look at some of those who embodied these principles, some with their blood, others with their ongoing sacrifice. First of all, Haj Qasim Soleimani, the field as a mosque. The commander of Hajj, Haj Qasim Soleimani, may God rest his pure soul, taught that the battlefield is a mosque. He did not wait for the Imam to arrive to build the army. He built the army so that the Imam could arrive. He defined the camp of Imam Hussein as a place of constant operational readiness. He said, "We are the nation of Imam Hussein. We are the nation of martyrdom. We must reach this maturity that one must not just look, one must recognize. We must be the sanctuary." And the references in the write-up. Let's now have a look at Haj Imad Maghniyyah, the silent architect. The ghost, Haj Imad Maghniyyah, may God rest his soul, embodied the phrase, "whatever you are able." He took a dispossessed people in South Lebanon and transformed them into a force that shattered the myth of the invincible army. His philosophy was simple: remove the excuse of weakness. As the martyr said Hassan Nasrallah described him, Imad Maghniyyah, said Hassan said, Imad Maghniyyah was the man who worked day and night to manufacture victory, not to wait for it. Next, let's look at Sayyid Abdul Malik al-Houthi, the Quranic iron. From the mountains of Yemen, Sayyid Abdul Malik al-Houthi, may God protect him, revived the specific Quranic doctrine of iron or hadith. He teaches that military manufacturing is an act of worship. To build a drone or a missile or defend the oppressed is to manifest the verse of quwwa. Sayyid Abdul Malik says, "Indeed, the preparation of power to confront tyrants is a fundamental part of our faith and our commitment to the Quran." The reference is in the write-up. And finally, let's look at the martyr Yahya Sinwar, the prison as an academy. So finally, we look at the martyr Yahya Sinwar. He spent 22 years in the prisons of the occupation. Did he just sit there counting the days? No. He turned the prison into an academy. He learnt the language of the enemy, that is Hebrew, perfectly. He studied their psychology, their politics, their weaknesses, their strengths. He embodied the narration, "The believer is intelligent and astute." His preparation in the dungeon was the foundation for the flood that would later shake the world and continues to do so. He taught us that Intidhaar means that even if you are in chains, you are sharpening your mind for the moment the chains break. Let's now have a look at the roll call of the Mahdi. The Imam does not need a mob. He needs a structure. He needs doctors who are the best in their field. He needs engineers who can rebuild civilizations. He needs strategists who understand geopolitics. He needs journalists who are honorable and righteous. He needs artists who are filled with true love and the spirit of justice. He needs scholars who refuse to allow themselves to be corrupted. He needs bodies that are fit for the rigors of global justice. To be out of shape, to be uneducated, to be strategically illiterate, this is to be absent from the roll call of the Mahdi. Let's now look at our next lesson for the present, the jihad or struggle of competence. We must contextualize power or quwwah for our specific time and place. For those living in the West, preparation does not mean hostility towards our fellow citizens, not in the least. The enemy we face in these lands and everywhere is not the ordinary citizen, nor is it the soldier sent as cannon fodder into pointless wars by corrupt elites. Our enemy is the oligarchy and the culture of death that they have engineered, a system that destroys the family, the unborn, and the elderly for profit and for control. Therefore, our weaponry must adapt. We must fight the system by saving the people it tries to destroy. Firstly, against the culture of death. The West is currently enforcing a state-sanctioned dismantling of the sanctity of life. Each of the fronts I'm about to name deserves its own dedicated session, and God willing, we will return to them in depth. But the soldier of the Mahdi must at least know the terrain of the battle, even before studying each position in detail. Our preparation for the Imam includes standing firm on these fronts. Firstly, the defense of the unborn. We must be the defenders of those who cannot speak for themselves. Abortion is the ultimate oppression against the most defenseless. And to oppose it is to prepare the way for the Mahdi, who is the servant of the giver of life, sent to revive the earth's humanity. Secondly, the defense of the elderly. We must oppose the legislation of state-sanctioned killing of the elderly, the generation that raised us. To view them as a burden to be discarded is the logic of jahiliyyah or ignorance. We honor our elders as the Prophet taught and the Quran commands. In Quran, Surah Al-Isra, the chapter of the night journey, 17th chapter of the Quran, verses 23 to 24, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, "And your Lord has decreed that you worship none other except Him, and to parents good treatment. Whether one or both of them reach old age, while with you, say not to them so much as uff, and do not repel them, but speak to them a noble word. And lower to them the wing of humility out of mercy, and say, My Lord, have mercy upon them, as they had mercy and they brought me up when I was small." And third, the defense of the family. As we discussed in our series over the nights of Fatimiyya, Wilayah in the home, the family unit is the fortress of faith and indeed of society. To oppose the ease of divorce and the disintegration of traditional roles is a strategic act of defense. And next we look at the power of character. These defenses of life, the elderly and the family are not won through aggression, but through example. The Prophet did not conquer hearts with a sword. He conquered them with a character so sublime it disarmed his enemies. We recall the history of the Battle of Badr, the first battle in Islam. After this first military victory of Islam, the Prophet Muhammad did not go away and execute all the prisoners. Rather, he established a ransom of knowledge. Any prisoner who could teach 10 Muslims to read or write earned his freedom. We have hadith. The Messenger of God made the ransom of some of the captives of Badr that a man among them should teach 10 of the children of the Ansar writing. Whoever taught them, then he was free. The references are in the write-up. This established the eternal doctrine. Education is more valuable than revenge. The Prophet Muhammad has taught us clearly, kindness is never found in a thing except that it beautifies it, and harshness is never found in a thing except that it disgraces it. The lesson for us is clear. In the West, in the diaspora, our power is our utility. We must be the best doctors, the most honest accountants, the most helpful neighbors. We must be so integral to society that they cannot ignore our truth. And let's now look at the notion of civic courage. We must stand against the use of our tax resources for genocide. It is a form of Intidhaar to speak out against the diversion of wealth from healthcare and education, for example, to the funding of foreign wars and genocides. This is enjoining the good on a systemic level. Let's now look at a very important point, the universal prohibition of treachery. We must explicitly condemn the practice where individuals take out large loans or even small loans from banks or other institutions in non-Muslim countries with the specific intention of fleeing to Muslim countries without repaying them. In Islam, there is a technical term for this. The term is sariqa, means theft. To consume wealth through deception is haram under all circumstances. It brings the curse of God, not his blessing. A soldier of the Mahdi cannot build a house on stolen money. Our standard is the universal exemplar. God declares in the Quran in Surah Al-Ahzab, the chapter of the Confederates, 33rd chapter of the Quran, verse 21, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, "You have indeed in the Messenger of God a beautiful exemplar for anyone whose hope is in God and the final day." This beautiful exemplar was honest with the friend and foe alike. He was known as Al-Amin, the trustworthy, by the very pagans who sought to kill him. To betray a trust, even the trust of a financial contract with a secular bank, is to betray the sunnah of the Prophet. Let's now look at our call to clarify, refuting the slander of criminality. We must also address the malicious propaganda propagated by corrupt media oligarchs, elites, and politicians, who accuse resistance movements and believers of funding themselves through drug trafficking and crime. These accusations are baseless projections designed to delegitimize the defense of the oppressed. The resistance is bound by Sharia. To sell poison to humanity, whether drugs or vice or anything like this, is an act of war against God. History exposes who the real drug kingpins actually are. Reports from the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime, the UNODC, confirm that in 2000 to 2001, under the strict religious ban of the Taliban in Afghanistan, and I'm not saying the Taliban are exemplary Islamic, but under the Taliban's strict religious ban in Afghanistan, opium cultivation fell by 91% to almost zero. This is the interesting piece. Yet immediately following the US invasion and the so-called war on terror, opium production skyrocketed to historical highs, right under the eyes of the occupation forces. Firstly, about the reduction in the time of Taliban. The United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime, the reference for the World Drug Report for 2003 is in the write-up. It says, in July 2000, Taliban leader Mullah Omar argued that opium was against Islam and banned its cultivation. The ban was effective. Production fell by 91%. This is the UN saying this, not me. However, immediately following the US invasion in late 2001, the production skyrocketed. By the very next harvest in 2002, under the eyes of the occupation forces, it surged back to 3,400 tons. Again, the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime says the 2002 opium poppy harvest is estimated to be around 3,400 tons. The resumption of opium poppy cultivation in 2002 brings Afghanistan back to the levels of the mid-1990s. The references are in the write-up. This trend continued unchecked. By 2017, with thousands of foreign troops on the ground, production hit a historical record. Again, the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime, UNODC, in its Afghanistan Opium Survey of 2017, writes, opium production in Afghanistan increased by 87% to a record level of 9,000 metric tons in 2017. So this data forces a difficult question. How did a primitive militia, the Taliban, successfully ban drugs in 1 year, while the world's most advanced military alliance, NATO and ISAF and so on and so forth, oversaw a 4,000% increase in production over 20 years? Therefore, criminality is the tool of the occupier, not the tool of the resistor or the oppressed. We must be clear, very clear. A Muslim who commits or who sells drugs, commits theft or engages in violence or any other crime against innocents is not serving the cause. Rather, such a person is serving the enemy. Just because a criminal has a Muslim name or professes to be Muslim, this does not mean that his actions represent Islam, any more than people would say that a Christian criminal represents Christianity, or a Jewish criminal represents Judaism, or a Hindu criminal represents Hinduism, and so on and so forth. Those who seek to paint entire groupings, entire communities as criminals are described by the Quran as the true agents of corruption. They are the ones who create strife while professing to be peacemakers. In Quran, Surah Al-Baqarah, the chapter of the cow, second chapter of the Quran, verses 11 to 12, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, when it is said to them, do not cause corruption on the earth, they say, we are but peacemakers, or we are but reformers. Without a doubt, it is they who are the corrupters, but they perceive it not. Allama Tabatabai explains in Tafsir al-Mizan that this verse refers to the hypocrites, al-Munafiqun, those who destroy the moral fabric of society while controlling the narrative to appear as saviors. He explains that their persistence in sin inverts their perception, making them see their destruction as construction. Allama writes, this is a psychological deception. For when a human being becomes accustomed to something, for example, corruption, and his soul submits to it, his soul portrays it to him in the form of truth and reform. And this is a chronic disease for which there is little hope of a cure. And the reference is in the write-up. We must not allow their narrative to define us. The one waiting for the Mahdi is the most honorable citizen, the most honest trader, the most dignified neighbor, because he represents the government of justice. Please give me a salawat and we move on to the third and last point, which is the prelude to governance from soldier to structure. So we have discussed the individual soldier, the work of self-building. Now we must discuss the collective structure. A common misconception is that the Mahdi will arrive and build his government from zero, using miracles to erect institutions overnight in some sort of vacuum. This contradicts the Sunnah or the tradition of God. When the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, and his family migrated from Mecca to Medina, he did not wait for angels to build the mosque, or the market, or the constitution. He built a system. He organized. He legislated. He governed. The Mahdi is coming to govern the globe. Such a mission requires a foundation, a community that has moved beyond individual piety to establish collective justice. You cannot invite the leader if you have not built the infrastructure for his rule. Let's now look at this idea of Tamheed, which I mentioned earlier, paving the way. This collective preparation is what our scholars call Tamheed, the act of smoothing out the path or paving the way. It implies that before the global government of justice can be established, there must be prototype governments or communities of justice, or both, that serve as the landing strips. The Imam does not need a location on a map. He needs a location in the political reality of the world, a stronghold where the laws of God are respected and the oppressed are defended. This is not about east or west. It is about haq, or truth, against batil, falsehood. Wherever a community organizes itself to resist tyranny and establish justice, such a community is performing Tamheed. Let's now have a look at the revolution as a proof of concept. This brings us to the significance of the Islamic Revolution in Iran. We do not view this system merely through the lens of nationalism or geography. We view it through the lens of Intidhaar. For centuries, the believers waited passively. Then Imam Khomeini rose to demonstrate that waiting can take the form of governance. He established a system that is unique in human history because it is constitutionally designed to be temporary. It explicitly declares that the true ruler is the 12th Imam, may our soul be his ransom and may God hasten his return. And the current governance is merely a trusteeship holding the fort until his arrival. Imam Khomeini writes, "The revolution of the people of Iran is the starting point of the global revolution of Islam under the banner of His Holiness the Hujjah. May our souls be his ransom and may God hasten his return." The reference is in the write-up. This is the model. It proves that it is possible to run a modern state, not on the laws of the jungle, but on the anticipation and knowledge of the Savior. It is a proof of concept for the entire world to see. Let's now have a look at the universal front. This model of Tamheed is not limited to one country. It has expanded into a universal front of resistance. When we see communities, be they in West Asia, Southeast Asia, South America, Africa, even movements within the collective West, standing up against global arrogance, they are building the infrastructure of the Mahdi. Said Hassan Nasrallah clarified that today Hezbollah is the training ground for the future. You cannot expect to manage the affairs of the entire world under the Mahdi if you cannot manage a local resistance movement today. Said Hassan said, "You cannot be with Imam Hussein while you are neutral. Resistance is the practical paving of the way." Let's now look at from good individuals to just systems. Therefore, Intidhaar requires us to move from being good individuals to building just systems. If you build an institution that helps the poor, you are paving the way. If you establish a media platform that speaks the truth, you are paving the way. If you create a community that educates the children and the youth and the adults, you are paving the way. We are building a civilization, not a monastery. The Mahdi is not coming to lead a prayer circle. He's coming to govern humanity. And governments need governors in training. Let's now look at the war against the infrastructure of justice. We have spoken of what we must build: the purity of the self, the strength of the body and mind, the competence of the professional, the integrity of the citizen. We've spoken of Tamheed, paving the way for the Imam through the construction of just individuals and just systems. But we must also understand what we are building against. For just as we labor to construct the infrastructure of the Imam's return, the forces of arrogance labor to destroy it. If Tamheed is the strategy of the believers, then the destruction of Tamheed is the strategy of the enemy. They cannot defeat the idea, so they try to starve it, sanction it, and slander it. Let us examine their methods with clear eyes. First of all, the inversion of language. We must open our eyes to the blatant hypocrisy of global arrogance. While Western regimes prescribe and criminalize peaceful anti-genocide groups in their own capitals, they simultaneously work to de-prescribe and normalize entities in Syria, for example, that are essentially Al-Qaeda and Daesh rebranded. They label the defenders of humanity as terrorists, while providing air cover and political legitimacy to genocidal maniacs, eaters of livers, and the destroyers of shrines. This is the clarity of the end times. The masks have fallen. The inversion of language, calling truth falsehood and falsehood truth, is the signature of the satanic system. We must not be fooled by their vocabulary. Secondly, economic terrorism, the siege of the faithful. We must also clarify the nature of the war being waged against the camp of the Mahdi. It is not just military, it is economic. As an example, the so-called Caesar Act sanctions imposed on Syria and Lebanon are, by textbook definition, terrorism. Terrorism is defined in the English language as the unlawful use of violence or intimidation against civilians in the pursuit of political aims. When you blockade medicine, fuel, and bread to starve a civilian population into political submission, that is economic terrorism. It's not just in Syria and Lebanon, in Gaza, in Palestine. Even in the West, they're doing the same thing. They try to starve the base of the Mahdi because they cannot defeat it on the battlefield. Every child who dies for lack of medicine in a sanctioned hospital is a martyr of this silent war. And those who sign these sanctions will answer for every drop of innocent blood they have shed. Let's now have a look at the crime of the ceasefire. Finally, observe the events of late 2024 and 2025. A ceasefire was agreed upon. The resistance in Lebanon and Gaza, men of honor and religion, abided by their word. Yet the occupying regime, supported by the collective West, did not cease its fire for one single day, one single hour even. They continued their genocidal rampage, proving that they have no covenant, no honor, and no humanity. This betrayal is a major crime, but it serves a divine purpose. It removes the last shred of doubt from the hearts of people. It proves that there is no negotiation with absolute evil. The masks have not just slipped, they have shattered. To those who perpetrate these crimes and to those who issue token statements of concern while supplying the bombs and the funding, we recite the promise of the Quran. In Surah Al-Shu'ara, the chapter of the poets, 22nd chapter of the Quran, verse 227, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, "And those who have oppressed are going to know to what kind of return they will be returned." Let's now look at our last lesson for the present. Theopolitics, not geopolitics. The lesson for us today is to elevate our consciousness from geopolitics to theopolitics. When we show solidarity with the oppressed and those who resist global tyranny, we are not taking merely a political stance. We are aligning ourselves with the camp of justice, the camp that will be led by the Imam upon his emergence. We must realize that global arrogance, what we call istikbar jahani or istikbar alami, attacks these movements not because of their ethnicity or geography, but because they represent the refusal to bow to anyone other than God. They hate the spirit of resistance because it is the spirit of the Mahdi. Therefore, our solidarity is not a matter of political partisanship. It is a matter of religious obligation to the mustad'afin, to the oppressed. We stand with those who are bombed, starved, and besieged, regardless of the labels the media assigns to them. Our loyalty is to the principle, not to any specific faction or party. As the martyr Sayyid Muhammad Baqir al-Sadr, may God rest his pure soul, famously declared regarding the imperative to support the establishment of divine rule, Shaykh al-Sadr had said, "Melt into Imam Khomeini. just as he is melted into Islam. The reference is in the write-up. He understood that the goal is not the glorification of a person or a state, but the dissolution of the self into the truth. We support the system of justice wherever it manifests, and we oppose the system of oppression wherever it strikes. The lesson is unity. We cannot claim to await the Imam of the oppressed while turning our backs on the oppressed of our time. Now let's look at our final call to clarify, the bridge of deputyship. We must clarify the most controversial yet essential concept in our political theology, Wilayat al-Faqih, or the guardianship of the jurist. The enemies of the Mahdi try to paint this as a dictatorship or a theocratic tyranny. We must clarify, it is a bridge of deputyship. In the absence of the infallible, society cannot be left to chaos or to the rule of the ignorant. The Imam himself gave us the formula for the interim period. He did not say, "Wait for me without a leader." He said, "As for the newly occurring events, refer them to the narrators of our traditions, which means the jurists. For they are my proof over you, and I am the proof of God." And the reference is in the write-up. The great philosopher, Ayatollah Jawadi Amali, may God protect him, clarifies that the Wali al-Faqih is not a replacement for the Imam, nor does he possess the Imam's cosmic status. He is a trustee who holds the banner so it does not fall into the mud before the commander arrives. He explains that the jurist's rule is a shadow that exists only to preserve the order until the sun appears, at which point the shadow naturally disappears. Ayatollah Jawadi says, Wilayat al-Faqih is the shadow of the wilayah of the infallible. In the era of the occultation, the qualified jurist is the general deputy of His Holiness Imam al-Mahdi, holding authority in order to hand over that trust to its original owner. And the reference is in the write-up. To attack the deputy is to weaken the authority of the principal. We must explain to the world that this system is the only one designed to dissolve itself, to happily hand over power the moment Imam al-Mahdi, may our souls be his ransom, appears and returns. It is a system of stewardship, not ownership. This topic, the theory and practice of Wilayat al-Faqih, deserves far more than these brief remarks. God willing, once we complete our study of Mahdawiyyah and the periods of the lesser and greater occultation, we will dedicate an entire series to the concept of marja'iyya, religious authority, which will then lead into a comprehensive treatment of Wilayat al-Faqih in its various forms, its theological foundations, and why the position articulated by Imam Khomeini represents the practicality that is viable as a path in our age. For now, let this introduction suffice as a doorway to that deeper study. Please give me a salawat. We move to the conclusion, the covenant renewed. So tonight we have shattered the idol of passivity. We've reclaimed the word Intidhaar from the grip of those who would turn waiting into sleeping. We have established that waiting is not a posture of the body, but a state of the soul. And the state is one of motion, not stagnation. We have learned that the Imam is not delayed. We are delayed. The occultation is not a divine punishment. It is a divine test. And the answer to that test is written in the choices we make every single day. We have descended into the battlefield of the self and discovered that the uniform of the Mahdi's army is not stitched from cloth, but woven from wara', that scrupulous piety which stops at the amber light, not just at the red light. We have learned that the arsenal of the believer includes the rifle on the border and the intellect in the university, the discipline of the body and the sharpness of the mind. and we have expanded our vision from the individual to the collective. We have looked at Tamheed, paving the way, and we've learnt that it requires not just good people, but just systems, not just personal righteousness, but institutional readiness. We are not building a monastery, we are building a civilization. This is the covenant of Intidhaar, to live every moment as if the trumpet could sound now, and to build every institution as if it must last thousands of millennia. Let's now have a look at what awaits. So now we know who he is, Muhammad ibn al-Hasan al-Askari, may our souls be his ransom, the living Imam, the witness of our deeds, the heir of the prophets. We know what we must do: purify the self, strengthen the body and mind, and build the systems that will serve as the infrastructure of his return. But that leaves us with the final, most beautiful question. What is the prize? If we build this self, if we erect this system, what does the world look like when he finally emerges from behind the veil of anonymity and plants the banner of truth upon the earth? Is it merely a world of battles won and enemies vanquished? Or is it something far more profound? A world where intellect is unchained from the shackles of ignorance, where poverty is not managed but erased, where the courts deliver justice so pure that the oppressor and the oppressed alike weep in gratitude. The narrations speak of a time when the earth will pour forth its treasures, when knowledge will be so abundant that even the women in their homes will judge by the book of God, when the wolf will drink alongside the lamb, not because the wolf has changed its nature, but because the very ecosystem of existence will be transformed by the presence of the perfect human. In our final part of this introduction to Mahdawiyyah, God willing, we will gaze into that promised dawn. We will study the blueprint of the divine state and discover the civilization that awaits those who endure. Until then, let us carry this covenant in our hearts and prove it with our hands. Please give me a loud salawat. We move to the supplication eulogy, which is titled The Covenant Upon Our Necks. In the name of God, the most merciful, the most compassionate, the breaker of tyrants and the refuge of the oppressed. O God, Lord of the world, we stand before you tonight, not as the righteous, but as the aspiring, not as the worthy, but as the desperate. We have heard the call of your hujjah, your proof, and we have recognized our failure to answer it as we should. O God, renew for him this night, and on every night, and every moment between the nights, a covenant, a contract, and a pledge of allegiance upon our necks. O turner of hearts, our hearts are fickle and our resolve is weak. We make promises at the minbar that we forget by the doorstep. We weep for Imam Hussein in Muharram and disobey him in Safar. We claim to await the Mahdi while our actions delay his coming. So we ask you, by the right of the one who has no equal, keep our hearts firm upon your religion and upon the obedience of your wali. Do not let us be among those who recognize the Imam but failed to serve him, like the Israelites who knew Moses but refused to enter the Holy Land, like the people of Kufa who pledged allegiance to Imam Hussein but abandoned him in Karbala. O God, we do not wish to be spectators of history. We wish to be its writers under his banner. Grant us the wara of the saints, the scrupulousness which flinches from the doubtful as it flinches from the forbidden. Purify our earnings, our speech, our glances, and our thoughts, until we become vessels worthy of carrying his light. Grant us the quwwah of the mujahideen, strength of body, sharpness of mind, and mastery of the tools of our age. Let us not be weak links in his chain. Let us not be liabilities on his battlefield. Make us the professionals, the experts, the excellent, so that when he calls, he finds an army ready, not a rabble making excuses. Grant us the vision of the builders, those who see beyond their own lifetimes, who plant trees whose shade they will never sit in, who erect institutions that will outlast their founders. Let us be architects of Tamheed, not hermits of isolation. O Master of the Age, O Sahib al-Zaman, we see the bombs falling on the tents of the displaced, and we see the silence of the world. We see the hypocrisy of those who speak of human rights while signing the checks for the butchers. We see the children pulled from the rubble, and we see the journalists who call it conflict instead of massacre. But we also see you. We see your hand in the steadfastness of the fighters who stand against the armies with nothing but faith and iron. We see your light in the patience of the mothers who bury their children and then raise their hands in praise of God. We see your plan in the awakening of the youth in the universities of the West, in the streets of the capitals of arrogance, in the hearts that are turning towards truth despite every effort to blind them. We know that you see what we see and more. We know that your heart breaks for this ummah in ways we cannot fathom. And we know that your return is not delayed by cruelty, but by our own unreadiness. So we beg you, pray for us to try to become worthy of you. O God, if life grants us the honor of serving him, then make our service sincere and our sacrifice complete. And if death comes before his emergence, if we are lowered into our graves before we see that blessed face, then we ask you by your mercy that encompasses all things, bring us forth from our graves when the call is raised. Let our shrouds be our uniforms. Let our hands find swords already unsheathed. Let us rise from the dust answering the voice of the caller, ready to fulfill the covenant we made in this world and the one before. Make us the autad, the pegs of the earth, who hold the ground firm for his arrival. Make us the nuqaba and the nujaba, the chosen ones who form the vanguard of his justice. And if we are not worthy of the 313, then let us be among the tens of thousands, or the 70,000, or the countless believers who will stream to his banner from every corner of the earth. O God, we are impatient, and we know that impatience is a deficiency, but we cannot help but cry out from the depths of our need. Al-Ajal, Al-Ajal, Ya Mawla, Ya Sahib al-Zaman. Hasten, hasten, O our master, O owner, O master of the time. The earth is filled with oppression and tyranny. The promise is due. The cup is overflowing. We are not asking you to come because we are ready. We know we are not. We are asking you to come because without you, we do not know how to become ready. We are asking you to come because the world is dying and only you hold the cure. Do not let our sins hasten your wrath upon us, O God, and do not let our shortcomings delay your mercy, O God, from us. O God, send your blessings upon Muhammad and the family of Muhammad, the purest of the pure, the most oppressed of the oppressed, the lanterns in the darkness of every age. O God, send your blessings upon Sayyidah Fatimah al-Zahra, the mother of this Imam, the mother of all the Imams, whose grief for him is a grief we cannot comprehend. O God, send your blessings upon the 11 Imams who preserved this light and paved it and passed it from hand to hand until it reached the 12th. O God, send your blessings upon the awliya and the shuhada, the martyrs, who paved the way with their blood. From the companions of Imam Hussein to the martyrs of our own lifetime, Haj Qasim, Haj Imad, Haj Muhsin, Sayyid Hassan and Yahya, and so many countless others, and all of those whose names are written in your book, though the world may have forgotten them. We leave this gathering with a covenant renewed. We leave with the words of the Imam echoing in our hearts. If our Shia were united in their hearts regarding the fulfillment of the covenant upon them, the blessing of meeting us would not have been delayed. O God, let us be the generation that fulfills the covenant. O God, let us be the generation that ends the delay. O God, let us be the generation that witnesses the dawn. Amen, O Lord, sustainer of the universes. Amen, O most merciful of the merciful. وآخر الدعواني الحمد لله رب العالمين والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.